Okay, my loves. I know there are a lot of you that are out there that are really wondering, how do I even set boundaries anymore? Maybe you didn't grow up with great boundaries. Maybe boundaries weren't really modeled well for you, or maybe you were told that you cannot have boundaries. Maybe you're tired of being gaslighted in your relationships, and you're tired of feeling crazy all the time and guilty for trying to make a difference in your life. If this is you, then I want you to come schedule a call with me. Let's chat about the Unashamed Image Program. The Unashamed Image Program is geared towards you specifically. I am going to be helping you in our next upcoming session of the Unashamed Image. I am personally going to train you how to not feel crazy when someone is gaslighting you, how to be able to stand your ground, to keep your boundaries intact, and to also see through the bull crap. I am also going to be teaching you how to set really confident boundaries that you can really rely on. And I'm going to help you communicate them in a way that really makes sense. Basically, I'm going to help you live a life free of shame and on your terms. If you are ready and you are done feeling all the shame and guilt for trying to set boundaries, if you are not willing to live another moment the way you are right now and in somebody else's shadow, then this is the time to schedule that call with me. It's completely free, no pressure, just love, just support. Go to www.erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. Scroll down the page to where it says, Let's Chat About Working Together. Click on that button and it'll take you to my booking page. If you're ready to live the unashamed life, schedule that call. Let's get you in the Unashamed Image Program, my loves. From my heart to your heart. Bye.
Hey everyone! It's Erin Anderson with the Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching. I am super excited that you have tuned in today. Let's get talking about how to heal from betrayal trauma. Welcome to the other side of the struggle. This is a podcast where we talk about trauma, how to heal it, and then how to take it and use it to unlock your mission and your potential, and to use it to live your very best dream life. When you're dealing with betrayal trauma, it can be hard to know how to heal it, how to stop the pain, and to know what your next steps are to take in your own life. And these are the questions that we try to answer here. Trauma has the ability to rob us of our joy and identity, which is why it's so miserable to experience. But with the right tools and with the right mindset, we can totally reclaim that joy and even use this trauma to strengthen ourselves, so that way trauma does not knock us off of our joy again. Living your dream life should be a non-negotiable, but trauma tends to try to negotiate that with you. And even though trauma is not something that we will completely ever be free of in our life, the pain is negotiable. This is why I created Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching and this podcast, is because I want my listeners, I want my clients to live, truly live free from the prison that trauma can put you in. I want you to live on the other side of the struggle.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. So, I have been thinking about what could I talk about today that would really make the biggest impact to you guys? What is it that you're asking? What would you really love to know? And you know, I I've really been taking this matter to prayer, and the thing that came to my heart for these next two episodes is talking about boundaries and really getting clear on what boundaries are, the different types of boundaries, why I think you guys know why they're important, but also like how to create them. Um, and uh, because I know that's something you guys are looking for and something that you need, I also put together a new freebie for you guys. I hope you guys will like it, but it's basically a process that you go through to help you um, basically clarify what your boundaries are and get better at creating them. Okay. And hopefully this episode today will give you the tools you need to be able to create the boundaries that make you feel safe, make you feel heard, make you feel important, seen, valued, cherished, all of that. Okay. All right. So without further ado, let's dive in. This episode is going to be all about what is a boundary. Okay. And next episode is going to be about how we create the boundary. Okay. There's some things that we really have to have in place in order to create a really, really solid boundary. And we're also going to talk about how to communicate that boundary so that way it helps. So it's not coming across threatening, but it's also something that you're going to be able to repeat consistently and just stick to. Okay. All right. So number one, what is a boundary? Well, in order to talk about this, we need to talk about what a boundary is not. A boundary is not a punishment. It is not an ultimatum. And it is not about what you are going to tell somebody they have to do. Okay? It's not about controlling another person. Now, even though you wish, I know for a fact I have wished I could control someone before because they were, their actions were just driving me batty, right? And they were not respectful towards me. And yeah, there's lots of times I wished that I could control another person. But you can't do that, unfortunately. Okay, because you can only control one person at a time. One, trying to control another person is impossible. Unless, even if you were to knock that person out and strings from them and make them a human marionette, right? This person is still going to fight you because they have a mind of their own. You cannot control another person's mind very easily, okay? Unless if you get into manipulation tactics, which those aren't fun. Nobody likes that. Gaslighting, things like that. And if you're not loving the manipulation and gaslighting, obviously you don't want to do those things yourself, right? But that is literally how we have to control another person, is by manipulation and gaslighting, like literally brainwashing them. But that's a lot. That takes a lot. I definitely don't recommend that. I don't think that people who feel like they have to control another person by brainwashing them feel good at all. I truly don't. And so we've got to come up with some different tactics here. And the other problem with this is when you're trying to control another person, you can't control yourself. You literally become out of control. Remember, you can only control one person at a time. And so if you're busy trying to control another person, where does that leave you? out of control. Or, worst case scenario, in the control of someone else. I think back to, when I was trying to control my husband, right? And no judgment to me and no judgment to you if this is where you're at. That's all part of the trauma cycle, right? Trying to control. But the more I tried to control him, the more I found myself in his control, right? Not that my husband would try to control me, but like his actions made me feel crazy. His actions made me feel stupid. His actions, and that's actually one of the ways we start to realize that we're actually in that cycle, in that part of the cycle, the trauma cycle, is we start to ask ourselves, how am I feeling right now? And if I am feeling crazy, if I'm feeling unheard, if I'm feeling broken, if every single time they do something, I feel stupid, I feel dumb, I feel broken, I feel XYZ, right? The chances are somewhere in our psyche, and again, no judgment because I totally get it. The chances are somewhere in our psyche, we are trying to control that person. And I don't believe that it's what's the word I'm looking, intentional, right? I truly don't believe that it's an intentional decision that you're making if that's where you're at, right? You're hurting. And people don't make wise decisions or they don't think clearly when they're in pain, right? You think about somebody who's just had their leg broken or any bone broken, right? All they can see is the pain and they just want the pain to stop. And if they feel like somebody is hurting them even more, they're going to want to try to stop them as quickly as possible. So I get it. And emotional pain is often as severe or even worse than physical pain. Like it's a real thing and your brain and your body actually respond to it similarly as what they would with physical pain. So it's not your fault. It is absolutely not your fault, but the boundary is what creates the ability for you to create safety, to stop someone from hurting you. But we find ourselves at a bit of a disadvantage there because boundaries have not been well understood or created for a very long time. And I don't know where it started, to be honest with you, but I know it's something that hasn't been well understood and therefore not well taught. We truly, as a society, do believe that boundaries are telling somebody else what they're going to do, right? But the problem is that leaves us completely vulnerable, that leaves us exposed, and now all of a sudden we have a leaky boundary where we're not creating anything for ourselves. We're creating for someone else consistently 24/7, and they don't appreciate it, leading us to feel more and more unappreciated, unseen, unheard, and all of these problems. And so we find ourselves in a very, very vicious cycle, right? So what do? How do we stop this problem? Well, number one, you've got to understand, like I said, what a true boundary is. True boundaries are all about what you are going to do. They are all about actually keeping the control with yourself, self-control. Remember, you can't control another person. It's not really possible unless you really sink to some very low tactics. But if that's what you do, you are also sinking very low yourself. And nobody Nobody feels good when they are into mind games. Okay. And I know some people think that it might look like, if you know somebody that is into mind games, it might look like they're on top of the world and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, and the truth of the matter is, that person is very much out of alignment with themselves. Any person that truly knows themselves and likes who they are behaves in good ways. Remember, people don't behave above their self-belief. People do not behave above what they believe about themselves. They just don't do it. If people believe they're worthless, they behave worthless. They allow people to kick them around. Or if people believe they're the only way to get ahead in life isn't to work hard, like if they don't believe that they can work hard, then they end up having to manipulate, right? It really comes down to our self-perception and our self-beliefs. All boundaries do. You have to know who you are and what is important to you. Like, what are your values? What do you value about yourself? A person that feels worthless is a person that has very, very few, if any, boundaries. And there's many different ways that manifests. So, a boundary is all about you, what you are going to do. But that means, therefore, if you are going to start creating boundaries for you, that also means that you're going to have to take some time to get in and do some self-care. Okay. Now, yes, self-care is, going to the spa, getting your hair done, taking a nice long relaxing bath, reading a book, having that fun. Yes, that is all self-care. Okay. But self-care is actually more than that. Self-care is actually caring about yourself. It is checking in with you. How am I feeling? And getting really, really clear, dialed in about why you're feeling that way. Number two, why or what am I thinking that's causing me to feel this way? Right? Is it true? Like, leave the other person out of the picture. We're not here to people please, right? The only person you have to really, really consider in this moment is you. It's not about but they would say this, they would think this other person, no, it's not about them in that moment, it's about you. Because boundaries are about you. So what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And don't put any judgment on yourself as you start to get clear with this, right? That's not what you're here for. You're simply here to show up for you and have your own back and start becoming your own best friend. And a good question to ask yourself when you're trying to do self-care is, how would my best friend show up for me right now? And then that is how you show up for you. You have to like yourself. You have to love yourself to the point where you might not always be proud of every little moment and every little thing that happens, right? There's lots of times I'm sitting here like, oops, I probably should have thought that one through a little bit better, right? I have that happen all the time. But that doesn't mean that I judge myself harshly. I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm here to learn, and I'm here to learn from the things that I do right and the things that I do wrong. I'm here to learn from the things that other people do right the things that other people do wrong. I'm just simply here to learn. But if I put judgment on myself, that stops the learning process right there. And this is also one of the reasons why we begin to tell ourselves that we feel foolish. That is a sign that we're putting self-judgment on ourselves, and it just doesn't need to happen. It's not necessary. So dial it back. Stop the self-judgment. You don't need it. And just check in. Get a journal. Ask yourself, how am I feeling about the situation? Why do I feel that way? What am I thinking? What are the thoughts there? Are those thoughts true? Are there possibly any other perceptions that could be true? Right? If I believe those perceptions, does it make me feel more peace? Does it make me ignore the circumstance? How do I address the circumstance, right? These are all really, really great questions to be asking yourself if you feel like you are trying to understand boundaries, if you're trying to create boundaries, and if you're trying to create some safety for yourself, okay? The next piece to this, there are 7 main boundaries that I teach and I talk about in my courses and with my clients. And I'm going to talk to you about each one of them quickly today, just to kind of give you an idea of what the different types of boundaries are so you can also start creating them, okay? So let me also describe what a boundary is, okay? If you think about, like, I had a good friend, well, I have a good friend who doesn't believe in boundaries, right? And it is what it is. I am not here to convince anybody. I'm pretty sure this person, if somebody walked through their door and with a gun to their family's faces and demanded all their money and their valuables, I'm pretty sure that person would not be okay with that, okay? If you're not okay with that, you probably have some boundaries, okay? But that's neither here nor there. The reason why they didn't like the idea of boundaries is because they felt like it kept people out. Like it's a barrier that keeps people out, right? And yes, it does do that because not everybody should be in your space. There are people that are not ready or honest enough to be in your space. Take the burglar, for example. That's a person that does not belong in your space, right? That is a person that needs to be left out. So how do you feel about boundaries? It's a legitimate question. A lot of people come to me really struggling with this concept. They often feel guilty for setting boundaries, or they're not sure about even what a boundary is. You know, they've heard the term, set the boundary, things like that, but that's really confusing for them because it's not something that's well taught in our society nowadays, right? They know that boundaries are really important to having healthy, constructive, supportive, and wonderful relationships, but why? And oftentimes they also know that they feel like their boundaries are being violated, but they can't quite pinpoint what the boundary is that's being violated. That's why I've created the Clarifying and Creating Your Boundaries free PDF. You can find out what your boundaries are, how to tune in to what the boundary needs to be, and how to effectively create and communicate your boundary so that way you stay in this place that respects you, respects the other person, but also gives you the confidence in your boundaries so that way you stop being gaslighted, disrespected, and unseen. Having your boundaries really clear gives you a voice and also helps the other person stay in accountability with themselves. So that's not a role that you have to take on anymore. So if you are ready to really have clear boundaries, to really understand what your role is in the boundary, and to give yourself some safety and some protection against people that might try to gaslight you or are just being disrespectful, go grab my Creating and Clarifying Your Boundary PDF at erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. And while you're there, let's schedule a call with me. Come have a chat with me so that way I can really, really help you master this particular skill, creating boundaries, clarifying the boundary, communicating that boundary, and so that way I can also help you have relationships that show up to support you, cherish you, and love you. That being said, there are people that we do want in. And so when you think about a fence, there's a gate to the fence. And instead of allowing people to jump our fence and trample our flowers and our vegetables, right? And track mud all through our house, we show them where to enter in. We show them where the gates are. And this is where we start creating really powerful boundaries. Is because if somebody jumps our fence and tramples our flowers, that's really annoying. So we're also going to show them where the gate is, let them exit, close the gate behind them, and say, how's about you try using my gate instead if you want to come into my space? And use my gate with respect towards me, and then we're good, right? And then they can open the gates. They can walk up the path and into your space. Not jump the freaking fence and trample the flowers and the vegetables. Okay? That's not, and terrify the chickens, heavens forbid. Okay? That's not what we do with boundaries. So considering that, there are 7 different types of boundaries. Boundary number 1 is the listening boundary. Okay? Now, the listening boundary is the most powerful boundary because it takes a really good skill of listening to create any boundary, whether it be talking, physical, sexual, energetic, time, money, any of that, okay? You have to be able to listen to yourself, the other person, the other people, and what's going on around you. You really have to be able to listen to your gut to be able to create good, solid boundaries. You need to be able to listen to your situations. Heavens, I've been teaching boundaries for years now, and I'm getting better. I still get better and better and better at them. I feel like now I do a really good job, but there's even times where I feel out of control with myself, right? And those times, I'll be honest, I'm kind of shocked. I'm like, whoa, hold on. What just happened? Like, why do I feel out of control, right? I get really, really surprised by those moments. So they don't happen super often, but when I'm feeling out of control, I need to listen and say, what is the boundary that needs to be put in place here, right? What boundary have I not created that needs to be put in place? And remember, a boundary is all about how you are going to act and how you are going to respond. So the listening boundary, it's all about you listening so you really, really understand. It's not listening so you can respond, like formulate a response or a comeback or retort, right? It's listening so you truly understand where the other person or even where you are coming from. or what is really happening around you. It is important in order for you to set a very solid boundary, you need to learn the skill of listening. And that will give you clarity. Okay, a boundary, oftentimes people create boundaries and then they find that those boundaries unravel really, really quickly, and they start to feel crazy again, and guilty for setting a boundary. I'm sure there's plenty of you out there that have done that. I've done that, right? But it's because they didn't take time to really listen first. Okay? Listening to what the other person is really saying, feeling like they can, ask really good questions. And we're getting into the talking boundary there a little bit, okay? But just making sure you truly, truly understand where you are coming from, where the other person is coming from, and what is happening around you. Number 2 is your talking boundary. Now you can tell, like, the listening boundary and the talking boundary are going to really, really intersect. They're going to go back and forth quite a bit. And the reason why that is because you have to be able to listen, to formulate and understand, right? In order to formulate good questions, okay? To make sure you truly do understand. And questions come from that talking boundary. You want to listen and speak with respect, okay? Again, this comes down to knowing who you are. For me, I am a respectful person, right? So therefore, I want to speak respectfully to the people that are around me. I have to become very good at the talking and the listening boundary in order to do that. So I'm going to ask really, really good questions to make sure I understand where the other person is coming from before I formulate any type of response. Maybe they have a point. Maybe they don't. But even if they don't have a point, oftentimes my questions to understand them can help guide them to a better perspective. And that's really all I have to do, because a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still, right? We're not here to convince anybody to do anything different. We're not here to convince somebody to change. We are here to literally make the best decisions possible for ourselves so that way we can act accordingly to who we are. So when we listen to someone, we can come together, find common ground. Or if that person is narcissistic, and again, I don't judge narcissists either. There's psychological things behind that. That might be a podcast for another day. But even with people that are narcissistic and say that it has to be you that's the problem, they can't have any part of the problem, right? Well, then you can at least listen to that and realize, this is a person that is telling me right now that they can't handle being in my space. And so we get to make some decisions about what we do there. Okay? The third boundary is your physical boundary. Now, physical boundary, obviously, we talked about that a minute ago, with the example of the robber just walking in your house, putting a gun to somebody's head and demanding all of your valuables, like they had some right to them, right? Yeah, nobody's going to be okay with that. Nobody. So we tend to put up security systems in place. We have the police there to do to help with our physical boundary, right? Plus many other things that we can use to keep our home safe: locks, alarms, police. Maybe somebody might learn how to hold a gun, carry a gun, and they might have a concealed carry permit, all for self-protection, right? I mean, we live in a world nowadays where people are just, I'm sorry to say it, kind of crazy. and they do really dangerous things. And so it's important that we keep our physical space safe. Another place that we need to keep our physical spaces safe is online. Your social media accounts, your groups, um, Instagram, like any of those things. Also, just being on the computer in general, right? We put up firewalls, we put up all kinds of different things to keep our online spaces safe as well. If you're a parent of a teenage kid who likes to game, I'm one of them, right? You have to put up certain rules and certain things in place to keep your kids safe online. Like it's a major thing nowadays. That's part of your physical space now. Um, so like for me, I have set rules around the internet time, and I am the one that controls like every single device. Um, I have an app on my phone where I can turn the internet on and off to certain devices anytime I want. Because number one, they need to learn responsibility and they need to learn time management. And not only that too, if there's a threat, I can turn the internet off to that device immediately. Um, we also put time limits around, like there's lots of different things that we do to keep our kids safe. We also give them set rules, right? And I check in with them often, ask them to sit down with me and show me their phones. And it's not because I don't trust the kids, it's because I don't trust the people that want to get at my kids, right? And so we have these discussions with my kids. Like we really use the listening and talking boundary here as well, because I don't want my kids thinking that I don't trust them, that I think that they're irresponsible or that something's going to go, like they're going to do something wrong. It's legitimately that I don't trust other people around them. My job is to protect my kids. And so we sit down and we go through their things. I listen to them, and it actually becomes a connection point between me and one of my children because I really get to check in with them. And that's all it becomes without judgment again. The fourth boundary is your sexual boundary. Now, personally, I have a boundary and I've had a boundary since I was a little girl, uh, and especially being, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I believe that sexual relationships should be saved for marriage, right? I didn't get into any type of sexual relationship before I married my husband. So that would be a boundary for me. And it's a very good boundary because I don't have the pain of comparing my husband to a past boyfriend or a past person in one of the most vulnerable ways you can compare a person to them. If you're a wife whose husband has been struggling with pornography or any kind of sexual addiction, you know the pain of being compared to someone else and how that destroys a marriage. Um, and that's not something I need. That's not something I want to do to my husband. And that creates a lot of pain within me too, if I'm the one doing the comparing, feeling like I somehow missed out or somehow I was gypped, blah, 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 right? Simply because my spouse is actually human and actually physically there and they have aging and other things that happen to them, right? This is part of the reason why one of the few, actually one of the least reasons why pornography is so damaging. Um, I truly believe pornography is a satanic ritual, if I'm going to be very, very clear. And there's a lot of reasons why I believe that, and a lot of things that I've studied and seen that has caused me to come to that conclusion. And so it's very evil. And that's one of the things that is possibly part of our sexual boundaries, right? And one of the things that can violate our sexual boundaries is because intimacy between two people is a time where we become very, very vulnerable with the person we are making love to. And if that is disrespected in any way, we become deeply wounded. That is one of the deepest wounds a person can receive. And so it's really important to have some type of sexual boundary in place. What are you okay with and what are you not okay with in your bedroom? I'm not okay with the porn, personally. I'm not okay with having sexual relationships outside of marriage. I'm not okay with any of that. And so therefore I have to put in certain things that I am going to do if something like that ever becomes violated, right? So for example, say my husband is struggling with pornography, right? I might say something along the lines of, hey, I can tell this is a big struggle for you. I don't want you to feel judged. I'm not trying to make you feel uh, anything less than what you are because I think you're fabulous. However, this is not something I can allow in my home. So if you're going to insist on bringing it in by looking at it anywhere, then these are the actions that I have to take. Maybe that's leaving. Maybe that's kicking him out, right? Maybe that's changing your locks. Luckily, my husband is the type of person who, will communicate with me, but and come up with a solution together if something like that comes up, right? So it's really important to want to know what it is you want in any type of a sexual relationship and being very, very clear with how you keep those vulnerable pieces of you safe with another person and what types, like how you're going to respond when those things are being violated. And again, even the sexual boundary has something to do with the listening, the talking, and the physical boundary. So, getting clear with those will also help you clarify your sexual boundary. The fifth boundary is the energetic boundary. And the best way to clarify this is like, you've just gotten a vibe from someone, right? If you walk into like a doctor's office and you see that one person sitting there and you just get this vibe from them, right? That's actually your energetic boundary being violated in some way. And in a doctor's office, once you've got lots of people around you, sometimes, you just kind of have to like sit on the other side of the office as far away as possible from that person, right? But sometimes too, this is where we get into saying things like, I don't feel good going down that alleyway, or I feel like something is wrong and maybe we need to slow down if we're going down the road. It's basically like listening to your gut. Okay, listening to what your gut is telling you. You might not have the exact reasons why, and it's not necessarily even just always acting in worry and anxiety. You just have this knowing that you need to, that something needs to change, something needs to happen. You need to do something. So an example of this, okay, not too long ago, I was driving and I just got this gut feeling that I needed to slow down. And I live in an area where, there's a lot of wildlife, right? And they get taken out by cars all the time. But I had this just instinct, just this gut instinct telling me you need to slow down. And so I did, and I started watching really, really, really carefully. And there in the road, if I hadn't, like, as I was coming around this turn, was this giant bull elk. And he was huge, right? And I would have hit him had I chosen to ignore that energetic hit, right? There's also another time when I was a little girl, I had that same feeling, that just intuitive, ooh, something's wrong, right? And we have this, like, just the sixth sense when, like, from being children and stuff, like we're born with this. And as and I was with my family in like not a gift shop, but like a visitor center. And I remember turning around, and watching me through a window was, and the guy was on the outside, was this guy who was smoking a cigarette, and he was watching me, and he beckoned for me to come to him. And I just had this sick feeling, and I ran to my dad, and that guy took off. And come to find out, like a little while later, he we saw him on the news as somebody who had kidnapped somebody's little girl, right? So he was, yeah, like things like that, right? It happens. That is an energetic boundary. And the more we ignore what our gut is telling us, the more we ignore that energetic boundary. And so it's really, really important that we listen to that intuition as well. Okay. So that's that boundary. You also have your time boundary. Now, this is a big one that I think a lot of people do not honor. If we, time and money kind of are the last two boundaries. You've got your time boundary and you've got your money boundary. And I think a lot of people, if they're really, really stressed about money, they just give their time out, like crazy. But the problem is that creates more stress around time and money. When, say, like, you want to create some money, provide something for your family, provide something for yourself. And so you don't create any appointments for yourself. You just shove things wherever they go. Other important things get shoved out, like missed, right? And you're constantly having to reschedule friends, or maybe appointments for you, or anything like that. That's not having a good time boundary. And if you don't have good time boundaries, you also don't have good money boundaries, because your time is your one commodity that you cannot create more of, right? We're allotted 24 hours every single day, and somewhere in there, we really need to sleep. Okay. And if you're not sleeping, you're also violating your physical boundary, right? Time is a major, major piece to this, and it actually kind of does go into all the other boundaries as well. You need to listen to how your time is responding. And if you're feeling chaotic all the time, we need to get you organized, okay, with your time, having a schedule. And yes, like, obviously there are times when things have to be thrown out of the schedule, right? Like if your child breaks their arm, you're not going to say, "Oh, sorry, honey, I can't take you to the emergency room because I have a business meeting right now," right? No, we don't do that. We cancel the business meeting and take our child to the hospital because that becomes the priority in that moment, right? But if it's constantly in this, if you feel like you're in this fight or flight with time, that's an indicator that your time is not serving you well, or you're not actually serving time well. Okay. And so one of the things I really, really suggest doing, if you're feeling chaos all the time, is to take a look at what you want your days to look like. Create time boundaries around them. Make sure you have time for your family. Make sure you have time for yourself. Set appointments with you. Set appointments with your family. And those things do not get violated for any reason other than emergencies, like legitimate emergencies. Okay? And if somebody else creates the emergency, like if you have a boss or something like that that's constantly creating emergencies and saying you've got to come in right now, even though you've got something scheduled, you need to be looking for a new job. Okay? And there's plenty out there. And the last one is your money boundary. If you feel like money is not showing up for you, or you feel like you can't trust money to show up for you, again, we want to check into the time boundary. We want to listen to what our thoughts are about money, because we want to have a good relationship with money. We want to feel like it can come in, it can serve us, and it has a purpose, right? One of the best things to do is to actually sit down, figure out like what your bills are, make sure like that amount of money is coming in every single month, and then also like asking yourself, like, what else would I really like to do? How do I create those things? Okay. But that's where we start listening to money, is starting to ask ourselves questions like, what do I really think and feel about money? Is that true? And how do I create more? Okay. All right, my loves. So that is in a nutshell what boundaries are. I've talked about the 7 different types of boundaries, what is a boundary, what it is not. So in the next podcast, what we're going to talk about is how do we actually start to create the boundary? And how do we start living the boundary? Okay? All right, my loves, from my heart to your heart, I hope this was helpful. I hope that it gave you some hope. Go grab the boundary creator freebie that I've done for you. And in the meantime, I'll see you on the other side, guys. Bye. Okay, so I've got a question for you. Have you joined my free Facebook group or Instagram page yet? If you haven't, go and do that. And this is the reason why. I always post my freebies, updated information, and all kinds of goodies for my community in that page. I'm also really active. I post videos, I answer questions. So if you guys really, really want to get in and interact with me, go like me on Facebook, go join my group, The Other Side of the Struggle, Healing from Betrayal Trauma. Come find me on Instagram, Erin Anderson, Betrayal Trauma Coach, and come follow me, because I always have something good there just for you, my audience, and I love connecting with you there. I also post anytime that I have groups going on. I talk sometimes about my programs. So if you guys are interested in working with me, or even just following me and getting as much free content as you possibly can, go hang out in my group. Go connect with the ladies that are there. Also come and join Immune and Unashamed for those married couples that are following me, because in that group, me and my business partner, Kaisen Kidd, are also talking and offering some great content. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this podcasting episode. Don't forget to tune in next week. It's gonna be awesome.